like to welcome everyone back. Appreciate you being here again. We're going to go ahead and get started. Tonight I have asked for Jamie Paris. He is the high school teaching and learning director. And I asked him, I sent him an email and asked him if he would come and walk us through the process of exactly what goes on when a book is brought into Hamilton County, how they find out about it, how the administration deals with it, and how that book lands on the shelves. And after that, Jamie, after you get through that process, I would like to go on into how do we continually monitor these books? What does that look like, and who is responsible for that? So if you don't mind.
Absolutely. So good evening, first off. I am Jamie Paris. I'm the high school teaching and learning director. I also have Becky Covington with us over there, who supervises librarians. So she knows a lot more about some of this than I do, so she's available also to clarify some of the things that I don't know. The selection of materials in the libraries and different places, the procedures manual really is the librarian's handbook. That is the process that administrators, librarians, that's what we follow in the selection process. They're based on the ALA school library selection criteria and objectives stated in that librarian handbook. And I think that was emailed to everyone. I believe we all received it. Some of the selection tools, it also follows, by the way, the principles set forth by the Library Bill of Rights. The librarian, as they select books in coordination or conjunction under supervision of the principal, there's some selection tools, teachingbooks.net. They look at reviewing sources from ALA, state and national awards, reputable reviewing periodicals, and common sense media is also one that comes into play. Ultimately, when it lands on a library shelf, the librarians are responsible for the selection and the monitoring of those library resources under the direct supervision of their principals. There's actually 4 selection and acquisition process procedures that's in the manual, and I won't read those unless you particularly want me to. As far as so that's how it actually ends up on the shelves. The librarian ultimately is the one who's making selection processes alongside the principal in conjunction with the supervision of the principal through the criteria specified in the handbooks. Everything is followed through the librarian handbook. And the monitoring process continues throughout as teachers use books, as students use books, as they are checked out, as parents look at books as well. So that monitoring process is continually happening from the librarian and their peers, and as they become instructional materials as those come across as well.
Okay.
Becky, did I miss anything?
Okay. Okay, as pertaining to our policy then, the selection of materials, on down on page 25, it says the director of schools or designee will establish an administrative procedure for review and selection of materials subject to this policy. Okay, the administrative procedure is just the librarian piece. I said, okay, what goes in? The librarian just goes by the American Library Association's recommendations, because some of those recommendations obviously does not coincide with our policy, because our policy says particular attention will be paid to addressing the suitability of instructional materials that include content which might be considered sensitive by parents or students. For example, materials that contain coarse language, graphic violence, explicit sexual content, illegal drug use or alcohol. The director or designee, which I imagine that would be you or you, Becky, okay, will also establish a procedure for the reconsideration of approval. Okay, that's when the parents get involved on that end, but I'm talking about on the front end. Is there something in this policy that is lacking that allows some of the material that we have seen, some of the material that we are still looking over? Is there something in this policy that is not clear for these? Everybody says, well, the policy's good. Well, the policy is either not being followed, it needs to be made more clear. Exactly where is the breakdown that we get some books like we heard at Thursday night's meeting, some that I have some books that were given to us Thursday night, some books that I have personally gone over, some books that have been sent to me. How do those good books get past this process if this policy is being followed? Where's the breakdown? What am I missing here?
Well, I do want to add, and Becky, feel free to, so the ALA is not the only criteria. I'm looking at the handbook right now. There's actually at least a dozen bullets here. They're in the criteria for the handbook as well.
Yeah,
right?
I've seen some.
So
There's a whole list of people that you go to. I don't care where you get them. When they get here is what I'm worried about. How do they get past this policy that says coarse language, and I think the word obscene needs to be added in there, coarse or obscene language, graphic violence, explicit sexual content, illegal use of drugs or alcohol. How do some of those books that we have been seeing and that we heard in very high fashion last Thursday, how do those good books get past this policy if the policy is being followed?
And the policy is the selection of materials, right? 4.402, is that?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll speak to a little bit, and then Becky, again, feel free to add in. The books ultimately are selected based on reviews, recommendations. There's even a component for parent and teacher recommendations for the books as well. So the books are vetted through things like Common Sense Media, all the different pieces. And ultimately, I mean, that's as far as I know of my knowledge on how the books make the shelf. Right? Becky, I don't know if you want to add to that or not. But.
No, that's correct. So again, with the librarians, that's where the process can begin. It can also begin with teachers. Again, they look through what is being requested. This handbook that librarians have is based on school board policy. And so that's the exact process that we follow using the criteria from the American Library Association.
Okay, again, I will ask, if our policy says this, and you say that that handbook coincides with this, how do books get on our shelf that have this coarse and obscene language, graphic violence, explicit sexual content, and illegal use of drugs and alcohol? How do they end up in the library? Because I have been on the phone with attorneys for hours, and they all say, your policy seems to hit almost all the bullet points. Somebody's not following the policy. So I don't know if it's not clear. I don't know if we need to enhance it, to tighten up on it, because they said that this should be sufficient to keep those books out of our library, and I don't know where the breakdown is.
Which policy are you referring to?
4.402.
I'm curious, do we, with the selection criteria in the process, do we log any of that? Do we know for a book which of the criteria we believed it hit to merit selection? Do we have a record of that?
Say that one more time. I'm sorry.
So as you said, you look at the policy, it seems to make sense on paper, but something seems to be disconnected. Do we have for books a record of which criteria for selection were actually the book believed to have hit? So if there's a book and we wonder why it's there and somebody apparently thought that it met some of the criteria for selection, do we have any record of which criteria those were that the person believed it was, and who was it anyway that put the book in? How do we know it wasn't just put in without going through the process? Do we have a record of that anywhere?
We do have a record of every book that goes into the library. It's through our system. There's not a place to tell the criteria that it met. We don't document that. But every book that goes through the library, it becomes a part of the collection that's there. And so the reconsideration process, again, is there for books that need to be looked at. It could be that, from a parent or a student, that's the process that we use.
So I could clarify what I'm hearing you say. There is, of course, a record of the book in the system, the modern version of the card catalog, but there is no recording of the criteria for selection we believe it hit. Also, do we record who reviewed that book to ingest it into the system?
It ultimately falls on the librarian.
Okay. So that is recorded, that the
No.
no. So we don't record that, and we don't record the criteria, which leads to Ms. Thurman's question of the policy makes sense, but we don't seem to have any trust-building records of why that happened, or how a book happened. Or so in the best faith scenario, if it turns out that, as the state language uses, they say, you know, the work taken as a whole, somebody decided the work taken as a whole merited its inclusion. We don't have any record of that. People are left scratching their heads, and it makes it hard to facilitate a review if somebody does object. But I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get on my soapbox. We'll get to that later, I guess. But just to answer, if I'm hearing your response correctly, we do not log any of the criteria that were flagged. We do not log who decided, who was the actual director, principal, librarian who put the book in. That's all gone. All we know is the book is there, and of course we record it in the card catalog that it's there. But we don't know any of that process that has been put down on here on paper. We don't have any record of how that went. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Thank you, David, for clarifying that. That's a good question.
So, back to this policy that you're reading from, it's 4.402, line 26. It says particular attention will be paid to addressing the things, but it doesn't, I'm no lawyer, but it doesn't seem to like say we will absolutely keep these things out. It kind of allows for some subjectiveness.
Yes,
It's
this is
subject,
all subjective.
because I've read Harry Potter, not all of them, but it has course, and I'm not trying to go back to Harry Potter, but it's a great example of a book that's well read and respected, but it does in fact have coarse language, graphic violence, and illegal use of alcohol in it. So that would violate it, but this does allow subjectivity, correct,
Meg,
Ms. Thurman?
you're a sweet lady, and I know you, and I know that you have children, and you know we're not talking about Harry Potter here. You heard Thursday night what we're talking about. I want to know how those books get past this policy. Okay, Harry Potter, making fun, but how does that
Those
get
books are
past?
not in the elementary school, the books that were read on Thursday night, Perks of Being a
Okay,
Wallflower.
I don't care, I don't
They're
care
not
where
in
they,
elementary school.
it doesn't make, it doesn't, I didn't
So,
say, this doesn't say elementary
I know,
school.
but
This
what I was
says in
gonna
our
say is
schools.
that books that are appropriate for 14 years old and up are a lot of what these books are. And I brought with me a set of book reviews so that you could see the effort that librarians make
Okay,
to choose those
ma'am.
kinds of things.
Okay, ma'am, I'm sorry, you know, I can appreciate that, and that is good, and I'll be glad to see those. I'm still wanting to, I'm not gonna get out of the weeds like we did
But
the
it's
last time.
subjectivity.
We're gonna stick right here with this policy. How does Handmaid's Tale, that is not suitable for any age group as far as I'm concerned in the
That's your
school
opinion.
system.
But that is your
But how
opinion.
does it get past, no, I wanna know how it gets past this. That's not my opinion. I just wanna know how it gets past
You just said you didn't think it was
this.
suitable for any age group ever, and that is.
No,
your
not
I
in
opinion.
our
would like
school.
to
No,
reference
not
our
in our school.
policy if we could.
Hey, if
Excuse
I
me?
could, I wasn't here last week, but I have read the documentation, and I'm glad you brought up Harry Potter. My granddaughter attends Dayton City School in Ray County, and she wanted to check out Harry Potter last week, and they sent home a permission slip. She's in elementary school, but I did go over that Bill of Rights that you mentioned, and it looks like it is written by the ALA. You can Google this Bill of Rights. This is not written by Hamilton County. This is in every state, in every city, in every county. It's just from the Library Association. It looks like the librarians are encouraged to fight against censorship. I mean, it
Well,
specifically says.
that's not a legal document. They can use it.
Yeah.
That's not whether I made a
But
paragraph
maybe
of Bill
that's
of Rights. It's
that's
just
where
their
this is
Bill of
coming
Rights.
from, because it looks like, you know, if they do get a concern from parents, the helpful overview and guide says they should suggest an alternative. If the parent still doesn't agree, they need to go to the principal and get that policy 4403 in front of them so that they can fill out the reconsideration. And the reconsideration process then takes effect. So, and we heard last meeting that none of the books have been removed through a reconsideration process ever.
Could we ask
So-
Jamie that
Because they were
question?
satisfied
That may be-
by
that
just
may
giving
be-
another option.
Why they passed that.
I believe
because this
Jamie
is
handles some of those
telling them
reviews.
to
And
fight
also,
against
I
censorship.
would like to note that any book that's been called before the school board at this point supersedes anything that our district can do with their policy. So even though it's gone through part of the book review process, once it's been called to the book board or to the school board because they have authority over the district higher up, they can't go back and address it in the district, so that process stopped. The moment it was called to the school board and the school board took over the matter, the process can no longer continue. I can kind of layman's term what I was told from Jamie's office, but, or not necessarily Jamie's office, some of the administrative, sorry. But that the quantity or amount of these actual reviews was so little that they don't even have really quantitative data to apply to it, and the few that have come through this year have now been pulled to the school board. So we've not even really seen this policy fully through in action, and in the history, I think there's maybe been one, I don't know the book or any of the scenario around that, but that was kind of before it was really popular culture attention at the moment. So he might be able to address more of that.
If I'm not mistaken, these books were sent in, I'll have to see the date. I do have some of these that they were put in for reconsideration, and that was way before we got in touch with it, got a hold of this, because they said they would take care of it in how many days? 15. Yeah, well, they had it way before 15 days before it came to us. We did, because we were just told about them. We haven't really, this subcommittee was just formed, what, 2 weeks ago? So they had them way more than 15 days with these books before.
Who did?
Their reconsideration process, they were turned in, I suppose.
So what
They have a
step did they
date on
stop
them.
at and what didn't get
So
completed?
I have
speaking
no
for high
idea.
school, I have not seen those forms come across. What ends up happening a lot of times is the form has to generate from this local school.
Right, this is the school.
So sometimes those forms are sent back because they have to come out of the local school. Otherwise, it's breaking board policy because it's bypassing the board policy.
So if
Right.
community
Well, no, these
members
right
or
here-
outside organizations fill out this form and they don't have
They would still
a
have to go
trackable
through a local
teacher
school.
coming through the school, it would have to actually be from an actual school where the book exists.
Yes.
Where we have the issue, it would have to move forward through that to apply to
Yes, ma'am.
policy. Okay.
Because I have had these for at least over a month, I guess. I've had these at least over a month. And they were given
What are you
then.
holding up?
I'm holding up citizens' request for reconsideration of instructional material on the come up and the Hate You Give. Both of them were put in for reconsideration, and it was way before this committee got formed, because that's a moot point about when the school board took it up, because the school board is just now taking it up. So that's
So were
been
they
way
from
before now.
schools like what he said? Like, was there a school, I mean, I'm not asking
I
personal
don't know.
information of the student,
I have no idea.
So-
but if we're looking at the policy,
The policy actually has complaints who bypass the review reconsideration procedure who initially seek action from the board or director of school shall be informed of the policy and instructed to first seek solution to their problem with the involved teacher, librarian, or principal. Right, so the policy is meant to be housed at the local level. And what's important about this policy and the one before it, the one we're looking at 4.402, is the alternate assignment part of it, right?
Yeah.
So
That's if it's-
before it ever hits the reconsideration process, the first stage is to seek alternative assignment or text from the local school.
But that's for required. We're talking about library. We're talking about two different things. One, you're talking about the required that they get alternates. With library, you don't get alternates, you just get another book. But if it's required reading, that's
Right.
one thing. That if it's required classwork, it's another thing. But we're talking about these library books, some of which have been requested reading, not required reading. But, but those we're talking about two different things here.
They're optional,
I
I
will-
just not read them. I don't understand.
Excuse me?
They're optional texts.
That's
Why
what
do
I'm
you just
saying,
not
but
read
he's
them?
talking about getting you an optional, giving you some other
But all
classwork.
of these books on that list that we got last meeting, all of those books are optional books.
I know, but that's what I'm saying, we're mixing apples and oranges. He's talking about if something is required in your classroom, they will give you an optional.
Right, but if it's an
Right.
optional book in the library, getting another book should just solve that. We shouldn't even be here having this conversation.
No,
It can be
we're
solved.
trying to figure out how they get there to begin with, because all parents don't know to fill out this form. And I really thank God, even though you say they bypass going because this is what's happening. They get at the school level and it just languishes there, and parents never find out about it. This way, parents are being made aware. Now they know Now they know there's a process. Now they know there's a problem. Up until all this happened, no one knew, and I think that's the way some people would like to have kept it.
So if
That
I
it stayed at the school level and nobody ever found out about it. Now they know. Now, again, my question is going to ask, what about this policy do we need to fix to ensure that we do not have just such terrible sexually explicit material in this library for our students to get? That's all I want to know.
I would like to ask Dr. Paris a question to see if we have any evidence. I am an attorney.
Oh, well,
So
that's
I like
fine.
to see evidence. I would like to see what is the problem we're trying to solve here. So are there complaints from parents or students who have been upset, their children have been exposed to things they weren't expected to be exposed to? You know, are you seeing parents complaining? Or is the process working? That's my question.
They've been coming to the school board for the last,
No,
what,
it's
couple
Dr. Paris
months?
receiving complaints
has
from,
he?
Yeah, so
from
I,
actual students
so
and,
I will,
and
I
parents
can
in our
speak
schools.
only, right, I can speak only for my department. I've not personally had that from my department. That doesn't mean at the school level
Right.
that people have sought, you know, an alternative text or sought the process at the school level. It's just not
Are
gotten
those
to our
statistics
level
we could
yet.
get?
What now?
Could we get that information from the school level? Is that
I don't-
centralized at
I don't know
all?
if that's centralized.
Okay, again, I will ask. I really don't care if it's only 2 parents or 3 parents or 10 parents or 50 parents. Really, it should make no difference. The thing is our policy being followed? We spend a lot of time making these policies. We spend a lot of hours on the school board going over almost 500 pages of policies. If they're not going to be followed, we might as well just not have them. So,
The
May I?
policy allows for a lot of subjectivity. as Meg
okay,
said,
well,
and
that's
I
what I'm
think
saying. How do we
you're-
fix
Yeah.
this to where A Handmaid's Tale, talking about spreading women's leg and about masturbation and all these other things we heard about the other night are not there for students to have?
I have
That's all I
a
wanna know.
suggestion or two on the policy, if I may respond to your question.
Well, I have some suggestions as
Yeah,
well, but go ahead,
okay.
Dave.
First of all, the part that you've already heard me beat as a dead horse is, but I think the discussion here just highlights how important it is to have a paper trail. And so I suggest, first of all, when it comes.
Accountability, that's what you want.
Yes, on the selection side of the policy. And I understand that some of these things are things that the board may ultimately decide they're going to delegate Dr. Robertson or people under him to decide, but we're not here to echo received wisdom. We're here to share our thoughts. So with that out of the way, I think it should, as I've said, when the book gets selected, I don't expect every book to get thoroughly read all the way through as much as we'd like that, but we should document the licensed professionals who okayed that book, which criteria for selection they felt merited that book being in, and then finally, and I was pleased to see the state legislatures looking along this lines as well, some sort of notation about what grade levels, age levels it seems to be appropriate for. And then finally, if, because this gets back to that stuff that's in the policy now that Ms. Thurman highlighted, the sort of the disclaimer of, it may turn out there's sensitive stuff in there and nobody saw it before. But if we know when we're ingesting the book into the system that there is content which on the face of it may be taken as, and I'm using the state definition here, harmful to minors, but the context, the whole work as the context taken as a whole, that's what the state uses, taken as a whole, suggests the book still should be included, you know, something for juniors or seniors. It's got some difficult stuff, but for that, taken as a whole, that book might be relevant, that should be documented too. So the 4 things on including the book is the licensed professionals putting it in, which criteria they chose to use, what rough age grade levels they believe it's appropriate for, and finally, if they're aware of sensitive language in it, but they believe the work as a whole should come in, some kind of statement about, yes, we know this is there, but this is why we chose it, which would help that process along. And so then finally, if I may finish, finally then on the other half of the coin, the part to fix in the review process, as Ms. Thurman said, it seems like things maybe have gotten bogged down. Well, I looked at the review process. It would be nice that if the book when we took it in, we knew that there was some sensitive language, and we knew this is why we want to keep the book, then, okay, the objection process will go through its normal process. However, if there is no statement, so we've got a book in there, and certainly that's the case now, where the horse has already left the barn. You've got a book in the library, nobody's sure why it's there, there's a question about the language that needs to be resolved. This is the part where I'm probably going to make some of my friends mad, but what I would suggest is you get an immediate prompt examination by the principal, the librarian, and the ELA department chair. They look at that specific quoted language that is on the face of it obscene or harmful to minors, some of the stuff that was quoted at the board meeting, and they make a quick call. Is this book going to stay on the shelf while we go through this whole process? Or are we going to temporarily sequester that book because we've looked at it and on the face of it, it looks like there is a problem? And that's the part where I could certainly see the board being like, they don't know if they want to do that. But anyway, that's what I suggest for fixing the process, documentation up front, and then afterwards, if there is an objection and on the face of it, the language seems bad, we get those three professionals, the principal, the ELA chair, and the librarian, to take a quick majority vote to be like, are we going to keep this on the shelf while we go through the process? Or we look at that and like, yeah, we don't know how that got in here. And just for the record, I've had parents and professionals come to me and be like, yeah, a couple of these things they didn't know about may not be appropriate for that age level. Okay.
Well,
Ms. Thurman.
Okay,
Oh, I'm sorry, you go ahead.
But I was just going to say, we did put some information in front of you. The House Bill 1944 having to do with obscenity and House Bill 2154. I think 1944 was being voted on this afternoon, probably right now as we speak. It was supposed to be voted on about 4 o'clock. Some of these others are in here. Okay, now, what you were just talking about, David, right here may be taken care of in this one bill, House Bill 2154. Over in the bill, it says, if a local board of education or public charter school governing body determines that material contained in the school's library collection is not appropriate for the age and maturity levels of the students who may access the materials, or is not suitable for or consistent with the educational mission, and I think we're all missing out on that. Some of these books supposed to have an educational mission of the school, then the school shall remove the material from the library collection. It doesn't say can, it says shall.
So is this a
So-
law or is this still a bill? Because I'm not sure that it's good business
It's,
to.
I did say it was a law. I said
Okay.
this is a bill that is being
Is it
introduced
good
into
for
the House. This is,
business to be changing policy based off of a proposed bill instead of a law?
excuse me?
I mean, there are so many bills in proposition right now. Should we be making policy based off
Well,
of
no,
proposed
I'm not saying,
bills?
I said if this gets passed, this may take care of what he's talking about. If this gets passed into law, this will take care of that. That's what I'm saying. There's somebody else that thinks that besides David, is what I'm telling him. This is a proposed bill. Right now, it has not been voted on yet, so no, it is not a law. It is a bill. And we're not making anything on anything. I'm just telling David that there are other people that feel the same way he does. So he says he's gonna make a lot of people mad, and they may not like it, but there's a lot of people that obviously feel the same way you do,
There are
David.
a lot of people that
Okay,
feel
Wayne.
different ways.
Thank you. I want to take a couple of steps back because the first book that was read on Thursday night is actually in my school, in my kids' school library, which is a K through 8 school. Well, right, this year, actually, they have 9th grade. Someone mentioned a minute ago that it's age appropriate for a 14-year-old, that book. I understand that District 5 had a Zoom meeting last night where a media specialist from a local high school said that the definition of obscenity has recently changed or changed over the time. So my question is to you, Dr. Paris, has the definition of obscenity changed? And if so, would you categorize these books that were read on Thursday night to be obscene and sexually explicit?
I honestly don't know legally if it's changed. I honestly don't know that. I'm not trying to avoid the question. I really honestly
Sure.
don't know. As far as what was read, I wasn't fully at that. I was a part of it and all of it, but some of that is. I'll answer it this way. What is viewed and what I view obscene from my children. I have every right to think about that and to say that. I don't necessarily have the right to say it about for your children. So I'm not trying to avoid the question, I promise. Honestly, I don't know if the definition has changed.
Okay. And at what age group is 14 the age group where that book would be appropriate?
I don't have an age group answer for that, Becky. I don't know if there's a set guideline for that. I know.
Because as we all know,
media,
there's
I know
different
other-
maturity levels. You may have a 12-year-old that's more mature than a 16-year-old, a 16-year-old that's not as mature as and vice versa. So if there's a defined age, 14 is it, honestly, the content that was read Thursday night that I have a copy of right here, I don't think is appropriate for any age. Okay? I know that's subjective and that's my opinion. But at the end of the day, there should be policy and standards in place, because when you look at the librarian handbook, which a lot of people have mentioned many, many times, it is very subjective. There's no standards in there. In fact, one of the individuals that chairs and is on the leadership team was on this committee 2 weeks ago and said that all high schoolers are having sex. So that's very subjective.
She didn't say all. She definitely did not say all. She said, I'm not saying all. She said, we know some high schoolers have sex.
Okay.
Did not say
So
all.
would you agree that the librarian handbook is very subjective?
Would I?
Yes.
Yes, it allows for subjectivity.
Would you agree that there are no standards on the librarian handbook?
No, I would not agree with that.
Okay. Well, we disagree.
Can we all agree that pedophilia and bestiality shouldn't be read by high schoolers? Can we all
You gotta
agree
leave
with
the
that?
Bible out then. I'm serious. You have to leave the Bible out then.
This is a question of
Bestiality,
morality.
The Bible?
This
Not
is a,
bestiality, but pedophilia.
this is a question of morality. It
I would
is.
need to see examples where that is being taught
Pedophilia?
None of
from the
these books are
Bible.
being taught. None of them are
From the
being
Bible.
Handmaid's Tale was on a suggested reading list, and the
Yes.
child,
Suggested,
the
not-
child brought it
not
home
required.
and had to stop reading it because it was so
And then you got
explicit.
to parent, right? Like, to me, if it was suggested and my child comes home, that
But
is
the
where
parent
my
wasn't
freedom to
informed
parent.
before the child checked
You
it
don't
out.
have to.
Okay, yeah, I started to say, hold on just a minute.
Dragon.
I'd
He
like
was-
to
he
reference
was
our
finishing.
policy whenever, you
Do
may
what?
go ahead.
Yeah, well, I appreciated David's suggestion for the policy. I've also read the policies and thought about what are some ways we can, keep what's working and tweak what's not. And so one suggestion I had, I've heard a lot about individual parents objecting to individual books, and that parents don't know what is in the library. And so I was thinking that maybe we could add, I don't know that it has to be in this policy, but maybe it's just a broader notice or some sort of procedure to let parents know that there is a very easy way that they can alert librarians to their personal family values and preferences. And, like we talked
Oh,
about
they
in the
do.
last meeting,
They
they can flag their account. The child, if the child tries to check out the Handmaid's Tale, which I've read and enjoyed very much, it will flag it. They will not come home with it. And I think if parents don't know about that, that seems like an easy fix, just to more publicize that it already exists. It's not going to cost any more money. It's not going to have any administrative headache for anybody. And I think that will solve the issue of
Okay.
parents
No.
having books come
But
home that they don't want to come home.
that doesn't solve the fact that they're not following the policy.
But-
If the policy is clear, why are they not following it? That is my question.
No one has
The
shown that
super-
it's not being followed. It's very
Well, it's there,
subjective.
they're there.
The policy
there.
is subjective.
And the policy allows for them
The
to be
policy
there
allows-
because
Policy
it's
allows For
subjective.
something like the Handmaid's Tale being, the policy
So-
allows for that.
Yeah.
Well, then we need to fix the policy.
Well, so if you look
We
at
don't
the-
all
this is
agree
where
that
okay.
we want to fix the policy to keep those books out. We don't all agree on that.
Well, okay, then that's fine. We don't all have to agree, and we're never gonna all agree.
And that's why
The
having the
majority of
freedom to
parents will agree
choose.
that those books don't need to be in our library, so we have to go with.
We've seen no evidence that that is the case.
See no evidence that what's the
That the
case.
majority of parents think these books should not be in the libraries.
You actually think that they do?
I haven't seen anything to the contrary.
Oh, wow.
Just since we've been, since our last
Okay.
meeting,
Since your last meeting, what?
I've,
Hold on just a minute. Hold on, go ahead, Meg.
I'm no buzzworthy person, but I've had more people reach out to me and concerned that books are going to be pulled off shelves.
But do they
than-
know what books, Meg? This is what I'm.
Yes, and actually some of them were telling me that they've read them, or I've been meaning to read that, now I'm going to read that book, asking if there were specific ones.
Okay, well, they
like
can,
Andrew
but still,
Thomas.
you can't tell me
But-
this book's following this policy.
If
Am
we-
I
Yes,
crazy?
If we
they,
look
I would,
I was
their
told by
policy-
attorneys that if those books are in your library,
I
they
don't-
are not following your policy.
I haven't talked to I wasn't in that meeting that, when you met with the librarian, but I think the key thing is the board policy in the handbook allows for a lot of subjectivity, meaning some books are allowed and some aren't in different places according to the librarian's discretion. So some books that are in some school libraries aren't going to be the same as in other ones. And they have a way to flag students' accounts in Power School, so when they check out books,
But-
parents can block books that they're aware or don't want their kids to check out.
But Meg, we cannot give the librarian that much autonomy that they can do whatever they wish, even go above and beyond school policy. I don't care what their handbook says. Their handbook has to go along with school policy.
It does.
And if
It
they're-
quotes-
If they're,
it quotes
if
the
they're
policy.
able to just put anything in their library we want, if they want without any.
They don't put anything
Oh.
that they want.
Well, they
And
obviously
when
are.
we asked Jay, when these books have been a problem, was it Jay? I don't know his name, but he sat over here in the back, and he gave us examples of when books have become a problem. No one has wanted to get them banded to the point of getting them pulled off the shelf. He told us that when it has come a problem, the child or the student was given another book as an option, and that solved the problem. So I think, like Ms. Boyd said, it doesn't seem like it's a huge problem. It is to some people, but my moral code is different than my husband's moral code, and we're pretty much the same person, and it's hard to get us to agree. So it's going to be hard for our moral compass in here to get to something. So I want a policy that allows for subjectivity, because I don't think anyone wants me writing their moral code for them, and I don't want anyone writing my moral code for me, especially when it comes to selective reading. And I would love if my kid went to the library and checked out a book. Like, that is just something I would like for him to do, but we haven't gotten there yet in his grade level. So this is a very small part of the curriculum and their day that they're getting exposed to these books.
Okay, well, it's obviously a huge problem if we have bills in the legislature. Somebody has gotten the attention of somebody, and it's not just 2 or 3 parents that have caused all this, because some of these are, because I think that some of the Tennessee lawmakers have really found out what's going on, just like some parents have found out what's going on. And so, yeah, there's a lot of parents that have said about it, or we wouldn't have all these 3 bills, 2 bills. Well, there's actually, there's 2 of them that are right now in the Tennessee House. And if these get passed, I guess those.
We'll have to change it
It's
because
gonna,
council-
yeah, we will have to do something, because, like I say, there's obviously more than just a few parents that said about this. Okay.
I was just gonna comment on that. Obviously, you're right, because this isn't just happening in Hamilton County.
No.
It's happening in every school board meeting all across the country. Same thing, different day, same topic, same subject.
They've been awakened about some.
Parents have been awakened, they have come to realize that this material is in the schools. And I've been contacted since our last meeting, just the opposite of what Meg had been contacted by my constituents in my district. And they're absolutely irate because they had no idea this was going on in our schools.
Okay,
So,
so now, okay,
I
David.
I would be interested to know, as maybe just as a show of hands, or alternatively, show of objections, does anyone object to the principle of having this documentation when the book, obviously we can't fix currently every book that's currently in there, but at least going forward for the selection process, does anyone object to the principle of having some sort of documentation, whether it's my bullets or different bullets, of the licensed professional who brought the book in and the criteria or how the process was followed, a paper trail? Does anyone have an objection to that? And if so, I would like to hear
I
that.
don't object to it. My question is.
Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'd like to hear the objections first.
Okay.
Well, I really have a question, which is, can our current systems support that? Or are we talking about having to roll out a new record?
That was
So that's
the
still not an
question. Is it
objection.
more
I mean, I'm
work,
sorry
or-
to get a little bit more snippy, but we're trying to actually make some policy recommendations.
Yeah.
And wait, if I may,
Policy costs money.
so, right, yeah, and so we're not here to do the budget.
Cost of the implementation procedures that would
Hold,
have to
hold,
be
hold,
applied.
hold just a minute, hold on just
Yeah.
a minute. He's talking to this lady over here, let them finish their
Yes, for an
conversation.
So,
objection.
there was
Okay,
somebody who
she's
had an
talking to
objection.
her.
Meg, you had an objection. I would like to hear that. Yes.
I'll just pass it on to you because I think I mean, the rollout and how we would carry this out is a very important part. And I feel like you can take it. You can, go for it. I'll let them talk. I object to that.
It was like, who's gonna roll it out? Who is gonna cover the extra cost? Teachers, librarians, people are already, overworked in our school system. And we keep going back to that it's subjective. And if a parent does not want their child to read the book, then it's already set up so that they don't have to anyway. So why add more? Why?
Okay, so if I may respond to that objection, so my point of view as a parent and as a teacher, first of all, as a parent, if you're trying to build trust, and I trust the professionals in this county, but if you're trying to build trust, I can certainly understand a parent being worried if no one's willing to sign their name on this process. Then as a teacher, I will add, if you, as a librarian, a teacher, any other professional, you are putting a book, even if it's optional, into the school, and you're not willing to defend doing that by having your name on there, you may not be in the right business. I mean, we know as teachers, we get questioned all the time. It comes with the territory. You have to be willing to explain or document your rationale, just as you would anything else that you do in terms of
So
education.
then, if it's documented, so then what's the next step? Because the intention, let's just be real, the intention for people in this room, many of them, is just to put the books out anyway. So why are we establishing new elements to the policy, new additions, if that's the ultimate goal? This is not about individual choice, your rights as a parent. It's about just completely banning books and making decisions and and telling other families what they have access to. And when you hand me a list of books that's all Black, all LGBT, it's also about erasing communities. So let's just be honest about what it really
100%
is.
false. 100% false.
So if I may respond to that, so part
Look
of it
at
is...
the 100%
Okay.
list.
So part of it, again, is professionals, the licensed professionals have to be willing to stand up for this stuff. I have deliberately not gotten into the weeds about which books I personally think are great and for what age levels, and because I guarantee you, I might surprise you with some of the people I agree with and some of the people that I don't. But it doesn't matter because there's going to be a variety of opinions. But if the professional educator, licensed person, isn't willing to stand up for it, that doesn't look good. Are there people who might complain about
don't
that?
think
Are you going to
anybody's
be
arguing
if I
that.
may finish? Are you going to be worried that later somebody's come back
Aren't
and
professional
complain about your
licensed
book?
people so
Hold
that
on,
people
hold on,
yeah.
lady.
Then yeah, that is going to be a worry, but I think that's a necessary worry because we should all, as teachers, we're always supposed to be lifelong learners, self-critical, and if we are getting ready as a librarian or another professional to put this book in, and we think for a second, I'm a little bit worried about having my name on this, maybe you better think about it more. And that's fine if you then go in and explain your thoughts, and that will help you, but you need that paper trail, this idea that you can't question it, you can't document it, that's not going to build trust. That's why we're here now, because again, some of these books I think are
Their
appropriate.
name is already on
for-
it, if we're being completely honest. Because when the librarian purchases these books, and then they actually, I forget the name of the process, when they actually get them entered into the system, logged, and put into the library with their system and numbers and categorization and how you can search for them on the internet when you go to the high school websites and search all through their SORA system. When they enter that, that is stamped with that librarian's information. So as far as accountability,
there's
hold on,
more
may I
than
finish,
librarian.
please? If we aren't interrupting, please. The accountability measure is already in place. They, as far as their reasoning, I would assume if we went through this policy process and that question came up, they would be able to defend as to where in their Bill of Rights, where in the librarian's handbook, they felt that this was an appropriate purchase or an appropriate measure for their student. When I say that I was in objection to that, to me, the information that you're trying to receive is predominantly there. I don't think accountability for that measure is there. I think the policy is very, very subjective and gives them plenty of opportunity to put that there. For me, it's implementation. In order to try and detail and ask for every single item to be sat down, if that's the policy, that's great, but I'm curious how many media specialists you're gonna hire, how much time you're gonna apply to this, and before I could vote positively toward that, I need to see the dollar signs attached to it, to be honest. And Rhonda, honestly, a budget line, I mean, if that's gonna cost
listen,
money,
if
you
you're
say
go-
it's not, but it will in implementation.
No, if a librarian is going to, like he said, if a librarian is going to put a book on a library, she should be able to list the reasons why it.
They teach all
it
day.
meets
When are they
all of
gonna
the
do that?
And also, there has to be more than one person know that book's there. I keep hearing the principals I talked to today, some of them don't have a clue what's in their libraries. They don't have a clue. They didn't have any idea that some of these books were in their libraries. Because they said, if that's in my library, they didn't even know. So this is what I want to say, going back to the policy. Who is minding the store? How are these books getting in the library to begin with? We should not be having to get people to go back over and pull books out and ban books. The books shouldn't be there to begin with. Nobody on this committee is wanting to ban books. We want to fix the policy so they don't get there on the front end, so we don't, that's why we had this together, because of all of the, when I saw some of these
Students like my
books,
child might have
I was
requested it.
appalled. I have been here since 2004. I had no idea, none, that some of these books were in our library. And I know a lot of the other board members didn't either. That's why this committee's here. They wanted us to air out some of this, bring back to them what we found, and I'm going to take them all of the stuff that we have. But the very idea that there are not a lot of parents upset about this, that is not true. It really doesn't make any difference, because this is our policy, and we need to fix it, tighten it up. I just don't see any way that this is particular attention will be paid to addressing the suitability and instructional materials that include content. I just don't understand how that is as subjective as you say it is. And then too, a minute ago, it says if parents don't want their kids to have it, just let them opt out. Well, I say, if you want your kids to have it, why don't you go buy it?
Right.
So we're on different ends of this. It shouldn't be up to parents to have to pick up with their child's book and read through it at home to see it. They should be able to trust us. Here again, David's thing, the trust that parents should be able to have in the school system. To be able to say, I trust that when my child goes into a Hamilton County school library, he's not going to bring home some of the books that we have seen, and some of more that I heard about today. I mean, parents everywhere now are starting to look at books and say, oh my God, I had no idea. I had no idea my child was reading this. I had no idea this was there. So this is what I'm saying. Like I say, the attorneys I've talked to today said either you don't really need to fix your policy that much, maybe a few words here and there, and add a paragraph maybe. But if those books are in your library, somebody's not doing their job.
Was the school board attorney able to attend tonight? I'm sorry, I don't know
No,
who they
he
are.
was not. He is doing a mock trial tonight at his high school, his
Okay.
Signal Mountain.
Well, I'll just point out, and again, I'm not a First Amendment attorney, but I've done a little reading, and I would just point out that there was a lawsuit filed last week in Missouri over a very similar ban to what we're discussing.
We're not banning
And it was
anything.
based on,
We're not
it was
banning
based on
anything.
removing books based on
We're not-
a
this-
particular viewpoint. Well, the
this-
list that you've shown, as Mr. McKissick
Well, those
mentioned-
are the ones that people have sent to me, and I'm giving you the list. I can't help what people put on these lists. We've had some more lists.
Well,
There's
if
a lot more
We're talking about
lists.
that it's sexuality, that it's,
Coarse
morally
language.
appropriate, that is
Yeah.
viewpoint discrimination, and I'm just
No,
saying.
ma'am, we have-
The
we-
ACLU is filing lawsuits.
We have, well, yeah, they always do.
So I don't know that the
so-
county is ready to defend a lawsuit over a
Well,
discriminatory policy.
No, well, this is not discriminatory. This is, I don't see anything discriminatory about this.
I didn't see any books on the list about heterosexual relationships, about.
Any of the
Oh,
classics?
yeah, they were. There were some there, yeah, because some of
I
that,
looked at the whole
some of that
list.
crotch rubbing stuff was heterosexual sex, yeah,
Yeah,
it
and the
was.
rape that was
It really
going on,
was.
yeah.
So,
And the
yeah,
father and the daughter
I didn't
was
really care who it
heterosexual.
was. I don't care who writes the books. Don't even know who these authors are. I don't go back and look and see what color they are. what gender they are.
You probably should,
what
though. Should we not
sexuality
be
they.
researching
No,
this?
it doesn't make any difference to me. That's
It
immaterial to
does.
me. No, that means I'm being biased, and I don't want to be biased. I just want the content of the books because the kids reading them don't care what color the authors are.
Here's
or what
another-
sex
Yes,
they
they
are.
do.
No, they don't.
Yes, they
Ms.
do.
Thurman?
Yes.
Here's another book that's in a K through 8 school, Looking for Alaska by John Green, that actually gives a tutorial on how to give oral sex.
Do we have proof that these books are in these libraries?
According to
Because-
the HCDE.library,
Okay, so in Sora, because it's been cataloged, does not necessarily mean that that book is accessible to your child at this moment. So first off,
Well, what is
you
the
asked if it
purpose?
was in the
discrepancy.
library.
What's the purpose of that?
You asked if we had proof if it was in the library.
Yeah, so has
Okay,
someone.
it is in the library.
So someone has physically seen that copy in the library.
I was told 2 weeks ago that the HCDE.library.org would verify the books that are in the library.
Okay, I
Is that true or false?
I'm not the authority on that. I'm just asking a
Okay,
question.
so according to the HCDE.org library website, Looking for Alaska, John Green is in a K through 8 school that gives a tutorial on how to perform oral sex on a toothpaste tube, followed up by the act.
Are you imposing your morals on us? Is that, really, that's what some people would think? That is insane. That is totally insane. that
It's
those
grooming
books are
children,
available.
period. It's
Well,
grooming
okay, let me
children.
tell you, I have a principal friend who made this statement the other day, and she said, there are no redeeming value, educational values to these books. There are none. And she said, there's no evidence that there's any redeeming educational value to some of these books. However, there are tons of examples and documented cases where exposing children to this kind of material early on in their life actually affects the way they think, especially the way that young boys feel about young girls. If you continually have this stuff in front of them for them to read and they get an appetite for it and they read it over and over, it actually changes the way that their thought process works. There's documented
Where do we
cases
have
of
that documented for?
I don't know. I will
text?
ask her.
Because there's
I
lots of
will- I will
documentation
ask her.
about
I will-
images.
I will give you her name. I will give you her name and you can
But
talk with her.
I've looked
But-
myself, Rhonda, and then it's just, I'm asking genuinely.
Okay.
Because when I looked for that kind of information, I found where images and graphic images like that are on TV or in photographs, where that quickly changes behavior and how that affects, like that's why we use visual aids in education, because it aids in so much. I could not find data on how text, reading that at a age relevant age. Now I get it when you're talking about if you had something incredibly explicit or graphic to a just beginning reader or something like that. Very big disparity. I think that is to be said, that we're not talking about that kind of material. But any type of data showing that reading text creates those kind of behavioral problems, and I would like to see that data if it
Okay,
exists.
well, if it exists, I'm sure it does. Or this principal would certainly not have lied about it. So I will ask her if she would mind me sharing her information with you. I'll be glad to do that. It won't be a problem. Okay, go ahead.
What would you like to see change about the policy?
Okay, the policy, like I said, there's a couple of things that I would like to see changed. First of all, I didn't realize that I'm gonna have to go back to and then think about that, because I didn't realize that people saw that as so subjective. That one, a line there in 25 and 26 on the first page. I think instead of just saying, for example, materials that contain coarse, I think that needs to be, or obscene language. I think the word obscene needs to be put in there, because some people say that's not coarse, that's obscene. Some people say it's obscene, that's just coarse language. I think both of those words need to be in there. Also, the last paragraph, under library collection on line 10, I'm just not real sure about that whole paragraph, even though there's parts of that I like, because it says these books will be continually monitored. It says, however, there may be sensitive content contained in these books that was not previously reviewed by the school personnel. There should be no books there that have not been previously reviewed by school personnel. I think that needs to be taken out,
Yeah.
because there should be no books there, because that just, you talk about opening up a whole can of worms there. That way you could put everything in there and says, well, they said there would be books in here that hadn't been reviewed by school personnel. I think that's why we've gotten into some of the things that we have now. I would take out that entire part.
So if you take that out, would that require a review of everything that's in every classroom and every library already?
Well, we will change the policy, and if anything, in this new policy, if whatever's on the shelves does not fit into this policy, that will be up to them to do that.
Yeah.
It will not be up to us, it will be up to them to do that. Because just like we change every other policy, like when we put no smoking on the school grounds, we had to go around and it was up to the principals and all to implement that. No vaping, it's up to the schools to handle that, it's not up to us, it's up to them. We change policies, they have to comply, that's just the way it is. And then also, another paragraph at the end, I think, since we seem to be getting around by some of the books that are in classrooms, this is a paragraph I would like to see added at the end. Schools are prohibited from adding any books or other reading material to libraries or other collections without first vetting the suitability of any such materials for the school students under the terms of this policy and policy 4.403. Because that will take care of any reading material that any outside people come in. Because another thing I would like to do is to have a different policy. It will probably require a different policy. I'll have to talk to the school board attorney because there are some other groups now wanting to come in and put books in some of our classrooms. And so we're going to have a way to, the school board's going to have to vote on this. We can't just be letting everybody come in and put any books they want on from any groups. There's lots of groups that would like to do this now that they found out that this is happening, want to know how they can come in and put books on the shelves in the library. So pretty soon we may have, so you have corner libraries, we have 4 corners in a classroom, we may have one in every corner. I'm not real sure what's going to happen with this, but we're going to have a way to get a handle on this. So we may have to have another policy or add to this policy. Okay, Meg?
So you want it to, I'm going to start with the first thing you said. You want the policy to read where it's not subjective, it's objective, to keep out not coarse language, but obscene language.
No, I want to add obscene, coarse or obscene language.
Coarse or obscene language, and graphic violence, explicit sexual content, illegal use of drugs or alcohol.
It's
So you want all those things to be very clear. They're not in the books of in our schools.
Well, I think that there is maybe a little bit of leeway in there, but not to the point of what we're doing. I don't know, should we put gross, coarse language? Do we have to put another word in there to make it more clear that we're differentiating between Harry Potter and Handmaid's Tale? What does there need to be to make sure that people understand that they can't slip through the cracks and say, oh, that you're now violating my First Amendment rights, which is absolutely absurd. That's just crazy. We violated kids' First Amendment rights in this whole, Sherry, did we do the Code of Acceptable Behavior? I did give you all that. And here it tells what students are allowed to say, what they're not allowed to say. Is this a violation of First Amendment rights? I don't think so.
Well, I think the
we tell them what they
code,
can say and what they can't.
Speaking
Okay,
and books are two
so,
different things,
yeah.
according to the law.
yeah, there's a lot of books, including the Bible, that don't meet the Code of Acceptable Behavior. But, so how, I guess, what I'm really having a hard time with is knowing, I get there's like the Harry Potters and the Handmaid's Tale and all that. I get that that's a spectrum, but eventually, if we're going to make a clear policy that keeps certain books off the library shelves or the classrooms, then it has to be very clear. And trying to define that line as a public is going to be very unattainable.
Well, I'm not
So-
the,
okay,
oh,
go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. I'm not the board lawyer, but I would guess, and so he can correct me, I would guess he would say the more that our policy explicitly uses the terminology in the Tennessee State Code, the better. And, you know, the section in there which Ms. Thurman gave an excerpt of last time, and I brought out the whole part, but where they define obscenity and harmful to minors and things like that, I think the more that we just use those terms and let the state legislature then give the definition. And I thought the definitions were pretty good, because I mentioned earlier, it's talking about that balance between the work taken as a whole, artistic and scientific value, et cetera. And I feel like to me personally, I think it represents a lot of what parents and educators have as a concern about, are we properly balancing at the right age levels the value of the work versus as the state would say, the prurient interest.
Yeah, and right here in Tennessee Bill 1944, here again, this is just a bill, it's not a law yet, but I feel sure that it will be. It talks about the obscenity law. I'm not sure exactly, yours is a little bit different from mine. But mine reads like this.
Doesn't it
It says the
propose
summary
criminal
of the law is this. As introduced, it excludes local education agencies, public schools, and employees and private contractors of LEAs or public schools from the exemption to certain obscenity offenses of the LEA, public school, employee, or private contractor possesses obscene material that is harmful to minors on public school premises, prohibits an LEA or public school from making obscene materials or materials harmful to minors available to students in school libraries controlled by the LEA or public school. So there is obviously a standard that they feel like that we have crossed because of things just like this, that people cannot even agree that pedophilia and some of these other things just shouldn't be in our libraries, because who's to say what's right and who's to say what's wrong? Somebody has to say what's right and what's wrong.
I think we'd have
or
to
the schools would
revoke
be
Bible in the
anarchists.
schools if we apply that
Anarchy.
law. If we apply that law to obscenity and you're applying it to the terms that you are objectively choosing to apply the word to, like outside of the law, because the law says a different thing, kind of what he was alluding to, that it's threefold. You can't just take a word and say it's this. I mean, if you have sixth graders with Bible in the school learning about Genesis and learning about seducing a stepfather to avoid birth and talking about, outside of marriage, sexual relationships and things like that. And
Tribal rape.
And that's in the Bible, and that's for sixth graders. That's not even counting what they go up. So then you're talking about supplemental materials as far as what text they're supplying for that. You're talking about curriculum. It applies there. Then you get outside of curriculum, you have things like the Odyssey, Macbeth, and
Greg's
plenty of
Around.
other classical
Well,
texts that if
see-
we apply that law,
Okay.
if we apply that law the way it
Okay.
reads, you're gonna have non-exempt criminal issues for teaching classic text.
No, this
Because-
law was, these bills are necessary because groups like this say that books like that were read aloud at the Thursday school board meeting were okay. If we had not gone that far, these bills would not be necessary at the state level. And this is what we have wrought by allowing this to continue, like I said, because we cannot even agree that in Hamilton County, that we cannot have these books that were read at last Thursday's meeting, that they should have never been put in our libraries to begin with. Don't care who wrote them, don't know who wrote them, don't know what color they are, what gender they
should
were, what
care.
sexuality they were. I don't care. It's not
They're
important to me.
relevant.
I just
Who
have one
put them in
question
there?
for
That's what
Mr.
I want to
Perez,
know.
Dr. Perez. So I know a lot has been said about The Handmaid's Tale and the list of books. Can you just reiterate, if I'm a parent, because I raised my niece with my partner, and The Hate You Give was one of her favorite books. We actually went to see Angie Thomas at the Decatur Book Festival so she could get her autograph and get a picture. But if there's a parent who hates that book or who thinks that it's not appropriate for their child, what do? They go to the school, say something to the librarian or the teacher, and what happens?
It's an alternative text. So they're providing alternative text at the same rigor level and the same level of standards.
And that applies to The Handmaid's Tale and any book on the multiple list that we've been given.
Yes.
And who's to say I apologize, go ahead.
Go ahead, Rebecca.
I feel like I just need to address this Bible thing that keeps coming up. There is a river of redemption that runs through the Bible. Those topics are in there. You're correct. But there's a river of redemption that runs through the Bible.
And there
What
are
about-
books, not the Bible, that
correct.
change people's
You're
lives.
correct. You are correct.
The Hate You Give has
What about
a
an
similar.
opt-in, not an opt-out, such as a permission slip? I mean, would you be on board with parents having the information about the book ahead of time before their child checks it out? Because a lot of the students don't bring the books home. They leave them in their locker. They read them on study hall. They may get that book out of the Hickson High School library that teaches you how to masturbate and look at it in study hall. So what about an opt-in? So like if they want the
No.
book, you send the permission slip home.
Then if you don't want your child to be subjected to any of that material, then at the beginning of the year, you as a parent needs to tell the librarian, please do not allow my child to check out any books that have anything to do with any type of sexual orientation. And that is your responsibility as a parent to do that.
But that requires 45,000 students, parents to be engaged and involved, and we know that's not the case here in Hamilton
Well, I
County,
don't
or
think
any county.
45,000
O-
parents
Okay, back again, like I say, I'm gonna stick to the policy.
You cut off anybody that
We're gonna
disagrees
stick to the
with you.
policy.
So that's
How
a
do we fix
suggestion of
this
how we
policy?
can change the policy.
Okay, then let's talk about, okay, what are your ideas? If some of you wanna leave the policy just like it is, that's fine, you can say that, and if you don't wanna discuss anything else, that's fine. You don't have to come back to another meeting and talk about policies. If you think it's fine like it is, you can let that be your vote, and I will give that to the school board if that's what you think. But however, if you want to change it, like David gave his ideas about what he would like to see, and I think he was spot on. But David, I think more what you're saying needs to go in the procedure that they have, because the Tennessee state law is going to say that it's gonna have to be a procedure, and not so much in the policy, because the policy mentions the procedure with this. That has to go with the superintendent. I think those are all excellent ideas, that somebody's name has to be on that. And whoever's name is on that, then that's who's gonna have to be accountable. I think a lack of accountability is the problem that a lot of parents have. Because that was the question I had. Who took this book and put it there and said, because I really didn't know the process. Okay, so if you have ideas that you would like to see changed, enhanced, taken out, whatever, say, I've told you what I would like to see, and this is gonna be my recommendation to the board. If you would like to have something, if you wanna take yours and mark on it and give it to me, that's fine. If you would like to discuss it here, fine. Angela?
Kind of to Rebecca's point, I think there's Flagler School District that kind of has a good compromise in how they create a tier system for parents' choice in content. And I think that it wouldn't be very hard to give a form that's informative so that all parents have that piece of information. Level 1 is open access. So you're consenting to that your children have open access to anything that would be on the shelf with the disclaimer that something could be there. I think part of that is also a CYA rule to also cover the district, that if something that wasn't brought in through a librarian or a teacher ended up on a shelf, that also protects the school district, I think.
Those books
also.
should not exist,
They
that's what I'm
shouldn't,
saying.
but it covers the, legally,
It
that's
doesn't
protection
protect
for
the
district.
children, though.
But no, she's talking about a tier of parents
Yeah.
giving permission.
So, but that disclaimer is just, I think, a protection thing there. But level 2 would give parents or guardians the ability to submit. This number could be discretionary amongst how many there, in this representation here, it was up to 5 titles. So if there were very specific titles that you knew that you absolutely did not want your child to have access to, you give those 5 titles. Level 3 would be pre-approval, which is kind of similar to when we were talking about like in Power School or in Sora. That would then be noted that in order to check out material, it's permission-based. And then that would be a communication process between the parents and the family. And I think that's a good compromise for both. I think it gives us all the information and we all get to choose. And therefore, someone's choice about what should be taken out isn't weighed heavier than my choice also. My freedom is the same as someone else's. And so if I, as a parent, want my child to have the freedom to read any content they can get their hands on and also bring it home, and that's between me and our parenting, my parenting, then that exists just the same as the right for a parent who does not want this content to be read. They can easily say, I want to be in this different tier. No one gets to speak for everyone.
No, they don't. They don't get to speak for everyone, but we do have a community standard that is expected of this school system. We can't, like, for instance, one of these books talks about killing police officers. A couple of these books talk about killing police officers, shooting them, laughing about it, thinking it's funny.
I think you can see
Okay, hold on just a minute, I'm talking. They think that's funny. do you think what if it was about shooting teachers? Is that okay? A book about shooting teachers? Is that cool? Why should it be any more right to have a book on the shelf about shooting police officers than it is shooting teachers? You know, it's a little bit different when it's you. And so we have to have community standards here about things that are going to be allowed and things that are not. And we have those community standards. Like you cannot say things and do things, just anything you want. Just open it up and let anything. So I want my kids to read everything. What if I wanted them to read about bestiality? Is that okay? What if I want necrophilia? They want to know what that is. Give them a book about it, you know. Is that okay? No, it's not okay. We have certain standards that we have to adhere to. I will still ask, and I was told by an attorney to ask this question of the administration, if our rules are being followed, how did these books get into the library? If the policies are being followed, how did these books get into the library?
I think we've answered that.
Oh, hold it, I'm asking him, Meg. How did these books get into the library? No, they haven't answered. They haven't answered because either somebody's not following the policy, because the attorneys I've talked to said the policy was very clear, these books should not have been there. Now this attorney thinks so, but that's why 50% of the people in the courtroom lose. An attorney's wrong every day. Every trial, there's an attorney that loses.
The attorney you're
So they're wrong
referencing isn't here
50%
though,
of the
so
day.
that's hearsay.
I'm saying
This is gossip.
that it's what?
Gossip, without the attorney present, you're speaking for them and that's hearsay.
I'm not.
It's
I'm
hard to
telling
ask
you
that
the
question.
information. I'm not on trial here. This is not a court. I'm telling you what I was told.
But we.
And okay, I don't care whether you believe that whether I talked to them or not. I really don't care.
I believe that you heard that.
Okay, and no, I believe I was told that. So they told me that either these were not being followed, it was not clear, or we needed to fix them. So which one of those three is it? Is it clear and they're not being followed? It's not clear exactly what here do you feel like needs to be changed to change the way you do your job?
I'll answer partly, and I'll let Becky also speak to it. But the books are selected based on the criteria from the handbook, right? So if there's
Which
the
is wide open,
procedures,
no
right?
standards.
Right. So there are standards to selection in the handbook, right? So based on the selection criteria from the reviews provided, from national peer articles, from things like Common Sense Media, other things that are approved by the librarians, that's how the books are selected.
Okay, I got that.
So as far as how they end up on the shelf towards policy, it's based on the procedures set from the handbook, which is based on peer-reviewed, common systems used by librarians all over the country.
So here they come to Hamilton County, they go before you to the books before they go to the library. Do you get to look at them? Does Becky look at them? Do principals look at them? So it's strictly the librarian that gets them and does whatever she wants to with them. So there's really not a procedure, because that's one of the things it says in here. There's going to have to be a definite procedure. I don't know if we're going to have to turn it into the state or what we're going to have to do at some point. But so it's basically just the librarian. There's one person basically. So there's really not a group that continually monitors these books and
There's
stuff.
not a group, that is the responsibility of the librarian. If you look at their job description, it's clearly stated that that is for them to do as part of their job. And with that, these are, people that are highly trained, they have to have a master's degree. In regards to following the policy is working because we haven't had anyone come to any of our libraries to express a concern about a book. Now, I do know, I can think of maybe 3 librarians who have reached out to me this year saying that there was a question over a text, and they solved it by having the parent come in and talk through the process that we have in place in the handbook, and that satisfied the parent, and it stopped there.
Okay, well, right here in the policy, it says that they will establish an administrative procedure for review and selection. So the administrative procedure is the librarian. She's it. So there's not, And administrative, other than the fact that she reads the handbook, and she picks out the books that she wants, and that's pretty much the administrative procedure?
No, she doesn't do it all by herself, she or he. What they do is they take recommendations from students, teachers, parents. It does go through administration. It looks differently at each school. Elementary, middle, and high are very different. However, there's processes at the school to where it's more than just the librarian doing all this on their own. Now, in regards to monitoring, weeding, again, that's part of their job responsibility, is that they do that.
So what I'm hearing is this policy is not really used at all in
No.
selecting the books. Is that what I'm hearing?
It's throughout.
It lays out several different credited procedures of how to pick the book. It's not telling you
So it's not using this criteria here that's on?
It actually quotes that criteria
Quotes that
in the
policy.
handbook.
So you're saying that you are following then this when you pick out the books?
Yes, ma'am.
So if you are, I don't see how some of these books got there.
Well, again, I believe it's because the policy itself, as we were talking about, is very subjective.
Oh, so it needs to be more clear. Is that, I guess I just want to know what we need to do here.
Not everyone agrees that we want it objective.
Well, that's why I
Some
say,
of
that's
us-
why you get to make your recommendations, and other people get to make their recommendations about how to change the policy.
Yeah,
So-
I just have, well, just 3 things I've written down, very simple little things, because we're trying to make something so difficult, so confusing, that no one can get anything done. All the reading material outside of the textbooks would align with the established student code of conduct. We have the student code of conduct. And I think this applies to all children. It doesn't matter what background or anything. It's fair for everyone. Everyone is, I think aren't all the children subjected to the same code
Yes,
of conduct?
And also the student.
So if we
code of
do
conduct.
that, if we line up the material that's coming in to basically align with the student code of conduct, we won't have any issues, because why do you want,
And we won't have any books.
Because according to the student code of conduct, you can't call someone a dummy, or you couldn't do something like that. But that means that I couldn't throw a rock in a book. I couldn't call someone something that's not profanity, or say something that's maybe slightly rude. I mean, I think that's
Okay,
where you
if
get
there's
into the
some text-
legalities of it.
if there's
That's-
some text in a book that does not follow the student conduct, set that aside and have it specially looked at to see just how far it goes against the code.
So
And
it's
whether or not it
subjective.
has any.
That's subjectivity.
Yeah, somebody's going to have to do it. Obviously, it's being done by the librarian, but obviously, they're not following the standard that we have, the policy.
I think they've been pretty clear that they've been following it, and they've had 3 instances this year, and it didn't even have to go to the process of review.
Like I said, the parents are not aware of this, of what's actually
There's a
in the
lot of
books.
things in my child's day that I'm not aware of.
That's right. You're absolutely
Yeah,
right.
that's why I choose
And
public
that's why
school.
we think it's more important to be more transparent, so the parents do know.
Then we can all go look at the books that are chosen.
You can't.
But another thing I want to say.
You can
and
go
I'll
see
make
what
just
ca-
one
you
more
can also
thing,
look
and I'll
at
let
what-
you all
Oh,
talk.
Nancy's still
I just
talking.
want to
Go
say
ahead, Nancy.
one other thing, and I'm through. A child, most of these children are under 18. They cannot go into an adult bookstore. They cannot. Why are you wanting to bring the adult bookstore into the school for them? There is a law against that.
Those are 2 different.
And these are minor children. And if you want your child to go get something out of an adult bookstore, you can do that. But I don't see why we insist on having this type of material in our schools. I don't see what benefit. If you can tell me some of the stuff that was read the other night at the school board meeting, tell me how that gives hope to any child, it encourages any child, or any of that.
Miss Patty, I think some people do think that it helps them, and some people choose to want their kids to
If
do
you
that.
choose
didn't
to
read the whole book.
read
Yeah,
how
and they- yeah.
someone
You
is
can cherry pick
raped
anything to
till
suit
they're-
your opinion.
gang raped until they are dead, you kill them, and then you chop their bodies up. I don't see how anybody would want to read that, or why you would want, as a parent, would want your child to read that, or what the obsession is
was the
about
rest of the book
reading this
about?
type of
That's in the
stuff.
Bible as well.
So,
Gang rape and
if I-
dismembering is in the
I-
Bible as well.
Did
I
you
think
get to
that-
say all of your suggestions? I appreciate your suggestions. Did you get a
I-
chance to say,
Yes, did you?
yes? I
Okay,
did.
that's good.
Thank you.
I think what we're getting at here, because there was this question about parent standards, and again, we're never in this county all going to agree. What we have to think about, which Ms. Thurman has also brought up, which the law brings up, is contemporary community standards. And I'm sure the board lawyer would say, you know, we as teachers, as professionals, act in loco parentis, in place of the parents. More than once I've had a kid scream at me, "You're not my father," and I would always joke, "I'm just your temporary father till your real father or mother or guardian gets back." So obviously the parent takes precedence over the teacher, but the teachers and the professionals have to act like parents in the meantime. So the concern is, what is that community standard, and the struggle of when it's optional material, is the leeway there and what isn't. I think multiple people have said that the policy on the face of it strikes a lot of the right tones, but then we're not all happy with how that's being implemented. Some people are, some people aren't. So I will just make one more plea to documentation, to save misunderstandings after the fact. The more that can be documented and stood for up front about why something was selected. It is perfectly natural for us to be having this debate. It's as old as time. The ancient Greeks, some of the philosophers were extremely skeptical of written books because you can't argue back to a book. There's nothing new about that. So I understand parents' concerns that we're sending our kids off to professionals. We want to trust them. I trust them. I've worked with so many great ones. I haven't all agreed with all of them. But the more, again, that rationale can be put to paper to argue for itself rather than appeals to authority, that is what I would suggest. And so some of that may fall more on Dr. Robertson, Dr. Paris, what have you. Some of it may fall more on the school board. But I just hope we all come out of this without being too much of a soapbox speech. I hope we all come out of this understanding that we're not all going to agree. But the more, I believe, the more we can put transparency on the process, accommodate all the different facets of our community, the sounder footing our school system will be on, our board will be on, and possibly the less rancor down the road. So.
Okay. Thank you, David. Okay, another thing, real quick, Becky, are our library books online? Some of them, all of them, none of them?
Yes,
All of them?
not all.
Not all of them, okay. Because we do have a policy, and that's something else, we do have the responsible use policy for internet, and so some of this is just some of the things that are said there. We didn't make copies of everybody. I didn't get this copies made. Did everybody have it?
Yes.
Okay, safety and security of students when used, restricting students' access to materials that may be inappropriate or harmful to them, utilizing technology that blocks or filters internet access for both students and adults to material that is obscene, pornographic, or potentially harmful to students. That's something else we may, since some of our library books are online, we might need to incorporate this into the policy. I'm going to get information about that from our school board attorney because some of this stuff, I don't know if does it block some of the words. I would hope it does. I don't know if it does or not, but that's something we're going to do. What I would like for everyone to do, okay, Meg.
I'm also on the committee that's looking at the responsible use policy, and this is actually the old policy.
Okay.
It is the one that's on the, on our website, but it's old. And the new one is the student responsible use policy. That does have similar language, but this is not it.
Okay.
It was never, what?
Has it been approved?
It was approved and never distributed.
The board didn't approve it, you all didn't approve it.
I started to say, I don't remember.
I
Has
can,
to go before the board.
Yeah.
I can send it to you. It went through the lawyers and everything. It just was never uploaded to PowerSchool or distributed.
Was it voted on? Is it the new
I
one?
assume so, because I was told it was actually, because I was
Okay,
going
well,
off of
we'll
this one.
find out, we'll find out.
And-
Okay, so we'll find out about that.
And then if we get into internet, I've talked to the board about this because the internet block is so low. And I would love to guide the conversation that way at some point. That's not what we're here for,
Yeah,
but
okay.
I would like to say that needs dire attention.
Okay, well, that's good information.
So thanks for that.
Okay, Kathy, down
I
there, I
had
see
a
you.
question.
Yes, I'd like to say something. You charged us all, and thank you for sending this to us, Sherry Ford, the library handbook. This is very good.
Yes.
I think we have something good in place. I didn't know it was there, and I was on the school board for 4 years. I think it's very good, and it allows parents to communicate with the librarian if they don't want their child to read a book. I think there is already a system in place for this to occur. You've already answered the question about I'd like to know how many parents have contacted their school library, so thank you for telling me that. I think that's very important to know. One of the things that I did write down, I think we talked about, concerned about books that are donated by parents or community partners. The books that are actually going into classrooms that we don't know about. And I think a simple solution to that, it would be more work on the librarians, is that any book, if we are concerned with those lists, any books that are coming to a school need to go to the library first. And that the librarian has the list of books that are approved by the ALA. So that librarian can say these books are on an approved list. No, they're not. These don't get to go to the classroom. These do get to go to the classroom. It could kind of be a check measure, but that would be something that the school board would have to decide on. There is a national standard for all libraries, and we are following it. People decide if they should read a book or not. The Tennessee Library Association stated that every book is not for every reader, but every child should have access to the books they may want to read. There is a lot of language. I don't use, I grew up with 4 boys in my family, older than me. They were told not to curse in front of their sister. We read tons of these books. We were avid readers until the day my mother died when she was 93. We read books all the time. I don't use that language. You use it as a teachable moment with your children. If they come home with a book, that's how the author is explaining himself. Doesn't go along with the Code of Acceptable Student Behavior because an author is writing it. That doesn't mean that it can't be read in school. We all have different versions of what is acceptable language. My husband curses like a sailor. He grew up in New York, but that's just the way they talk. I don't. There's nothing wrong with that. We have to kind of get over the fact that we all don't talk the same way, but there's a message to be learned in
So we
some
can
of
talk to
these books.
teachers like that. If you're from New York, it's okay?
Well, I don't,
Okay, go ahead.
I don't have an issue with language, quite frankly. But did you read a book growing up about how to perform oral sex in K through 8?
Did I read one about how to perform oral sex?
That's the issue that I
If
have.
I read it, that part didn't stick out to me, the whole message of the book. I'm more of picking out pertinent messages that the book is giving to me as a reader because I like to read.
Okay,
I don't
well,
pick
okay.
out quit. I don't pick
What
out
I'm
cherry
gonna
pick.
ask is everybody to take their, and next time we come together, have your recommendations ready. I'm not gonna keep beating this dead horse. We're either gonna fix it or we're not. So, I'm gonna have my recommendations ready. You get your recommendations ready, and, we will take them to the school board, and this is the way that it works. The members of this committee will make recommendations to either enhance or clarify or leave it alone. The policy 4.42, we'll take it it'll be taken to the school board, but first, the recommendations will be conveyed to the school board attorney, Scott Bennett, and I will get Scott to look over the recommendations to check for any legal issues, if there's something we can do, can't do, whatever. The board will take the information and draft a new policy if necessary with the help of legal counsel. The new policy will come before the board for a first reading, and then the board will kind of tweak it if it needs to be tweaked, and then there will be a second reading, and then it will become the new policy. That's the procedure that it goes. Yes. Yeah.
So
just wanted to let everybody know, I brought with me some materials to let you, have a glimpse into what it is like to be a librarian and to try to choose to go through the selection process. I collected, for all of the books that were on that list, I collected professional reviews, and you can see how long it takes to go through all of those. You're not able to read thousands and thousands of books. I also included what are the foundational, like, theories about children's literature and youth literature and how you would build those collections, and it's the idea of windows and mirrors, and that windows into other people's experiences help you develop empathy, mirrors help you develop the sense that you're not alone, and I also included the age breakdowns and anyway, so I wanted to give you an experience of what it is like to try to be a librarian and select materials under a time crunch and with limited resources and being one person. And I also wanted to talk about that. What I did is I gathered them from professional reviews are unbiased, professionally prepared resources, and I did this, I brought them because I found out after our last meeting that some of the materials that we received in our first meeting were not professional reviews. They were, in fact, taken from an outside organization's website and copied out and distributed here as if they were unbiased materials for us to consider in our process of making decisions. So I wanted to counter that with what I have provided for everybody so that you can get the kind of balanced, unbiased perspective of what these books, why these books might be valuable. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your work. So Sherry, what, about 2 weeks? We're just trying to work around the budget